welcome to episode 348 of RPG Fans Retro Encounter. Adventure Game Month continues. We had a great time playing Monkey Island. We investigated some mystery with Wolf Among Us. And today, we've reached the Schaefer portion of our Gilbert Wolf Schaefer Wolf Continuum. This is a very special, more recent Tim Schaefer game, Broken Age. It's one I personally really enjoy and backed myself, so I'm excited to talk about it. And with me, I have my fellow adventurers, John Logan.
Hello, everyone.
And Mike Sollosi.
Hey there.
Yay! All right, so when we first set out on this journey together, Sollosi, you mentioned a couple of specific titles in your adventure gaming history, Full Throttle and Grim Fandango. So it seems that while Jono has a LucasArts lens and I kind of have the Sierra lens, Sollosi is a bit of a Schaefer expert, especially since you're enjoying Psychonauts 2 right now as well.
I guess that's fair. I didn't mention this in the previous episodes, but I am a big fan of the mid-2000s platformer Psychonauts. I played that many years ago. It might have been... It wasn't my first Tim Schaefer game, but I guess for a while it was my favorite. And inspired by playing Monkey Island 2 weeks ago, I decided, I got Psychonauts 2 on sale over the summer. I think it's finally time to bust that out. And I have been playing Psychonauts 2 the past week or 2 weeks. It's awesome. It's not an RPG at all, so we don't have to waste a lot of time on it. But I think it's better than the original. And with apologies to Monkey Island and Full Throttle and Grim Fandango and Broken Age, I think Psychonauts 2 is my favorite Tim Schaefer game. It's really, really good. Oh boy, Jack Black is in Broken Age, and his in Psychonauts 2, he plays a brain that was in sensory deprivation for 20 years. So you have to jump inside the brain's mind palace, have it reunite with its bandmates, the senses of sight, smell, touch, hearing, and taste. And then when the band comes back together, you get a musical performance, an epic musical performance about sights and sounds, and it is amazing. And that's just like one level out of a dozen amazing ones. It's Psychonauts 2 is special. I would podcast about it if it was an RPG. Tim Schaefer's great. Broken Age, also great.
Tim Schaefer's friendship, like professional relationship with Jack Black is very, it touches me. I think it's awesome.
Yeah.
They're just two very different, like they come from two very different worlds of entertainment, but they seem to really click.
They have a mutual appreciation. It's great.
They seem like an excellent hang to me. Like, like if I was visiting Black's like studio or Schaefer's workspace with the other, like that sounds like an amazing afternoon, because they both are sort of very just positive, creative men that I would love to meet in person.
Also, when they grow their beards out, they're kind of gray now, and they kind of look like brothers a little bit.
Yeah, like brothers or cousins, or just two dudes that sort of grew up under similar circumstances. Like it's a vibe.
Yep,
it is. Well, I don't want to singularly give Tim all the credit for Broken Age, and we'll go into that and the wonderful team a little bit that worked with him. But a little bit about him to start off. He started with LucasArts. We briefly mentioned this kind of in those prime days of adventure gaming with the Monkey Island team. And he's gained quite the reputation for his writing and dialogue flair. He worked with LucasArts in its various iterations until he couldn't anymore, essentially, and founded a studio called Double Fine, where he made some new games like Psychonauts and Brutal Legend. And then he reacquired the rights to some of his old games so he could re-release them. So Double Fine is also responsible for Broken Age. It is the product of an early Kickstarter fairy tale, essentially. In February of 2012, Double Fine started a Kickstarter as an, at the time, unique way to see if there was money and interest in Tim writing another adventure game, or in a new kind of adventure game by one of these like classic era creators. The response was overwhelming, as in this response to this Kickstarter still remains one of the like all-time high responses. And it helped establish Kickstarter in turn as a legit funding medium for games. Some indie games were using it and kind of gave Double Fine the idea a little bit, but it really helped kind of solidify it as an avenue to raise funds for games. And, we're seeing kind of the consequences of this up through the recent Kickstarter for Fantasia and Pennyblood.
For the better or for the worse, this
Yeah.
pioneered the Kickstarter model of financing games.
Exactly.
I would generally say Kickstarter is a force for mostly good. The Double Fine Adventure Kickstarter has been eclipsed by other game projects,
Yep.
especially board game projects. Board games on Kickstarter are their own whole universe.
Yep.
But there were some gaming Kickstarter successes before Double Fine Adventure. FTL was a big success on Kickstarter.
Yes. Yes,
Before Double Fine Adventure, but Double Fine Adventure made such a huge splash, both in volume and the creator behind it, that you can almost look at Kickstarter gaming projects like before Broken Age and after Broken Age. It was a major blip
for sure. And what resulted was this 2-part game, Broken Age, that we played, and a truly fantastic documentary about the game making process that Tim and Double Fine felt they wouldn't be able to necessarily do in kind of genuine way if there were a publisher involved. So we'll get into that a little bit more, but if you're playing Broken Age, if you enjoyed it all, probably also worth it to watch the documentary Double Fine Adventure.
Oh, it's so freaking good.
So, all right, let's get to it. What did you all know about this game going in? What's your experience? What are your expectations?
For me, I knew about it. I mean, I was like, we've talked about adventure games and our history with adventure games in the last few episodes, so I don't think we need to go through that again.
Nope.
But I know Tim Schafer. I knew his work very, very well. And I was really excited when I heard about Broken Age. I did not hear about Double Fine Adventure. Looking at the Kickstarter now, it's very interesting to me that there's nothing about the game at all. Like when they went into this, to start a Kickstarter, literally the concept was, hey, Tim wants to make an adventure game. I'm sure he'll have an idea for one after you fund it. And that's what got all of this money. Like there's no art, there's nothing. It's literally just, hey, you remember all those games you liked when you were a kid? You want a new one? Okay, give us money.
Give us money and Tim will come up with something.
Yeah.
And also documentary. I think I was reading about the original budget, and I think there was actually a bigger budget for the documentary than the game at first.
It's so funny with the documentary. We'll talk about the documentary, I suspect, in a minute, but like you get to really see a behind the scenes look, and like they were not ready for the $3.3 million. Like they expected this to be like one step above a Flash game. Mm-hmm. And then they got $3.3 million and they're like, now what do we do? It's really hilarious. The first part came out. I decided I wanted to play it as a whole. So I waited until the second part was released, and I started playing it, and I played about 15 minutes of it. I just fell off it. I just didn't play it. And then a few years later, I picked it up and played through the whole thing, and I liked it. I didn't love it. I liked it. So going into this podcast, I played the whole thing again. And to be honest, I liked it a lot better this time. I knew about it, and I knew what I was getting into when we were going to record this.
Awesome. Great. How about you, Sollosi?
It was a little bit different for me. I did play Full Throttle over 25 years ago, but I didn't really have that history of appreciating LucasArts or adventure games in general, the same way you or Jono does. But I was aware of the Double Fine Adventure Kickstarter when it was happening. I've closely followed game news like that for my entire internet life, let's say. So I was aware of it, and I just went through my Steam purchase history right before we started recording. I got Broken Age in the Steam summer sale of 2016. So like I was definitely aware of the game. I was not part of the Kickstarter backers, but I did have a casual interest in it and got it when it was on sale 6 years ago.
You also got it after it was finished.
Yes, correct. I think when I heard it was going to be split, I think maybe, I don't remember exactly my thoughts at the time, but I did think, you know what, maybe I'll wait until it's finished before I pick it up. And I'm sure the price and timing were both right in the summer of 2016. So that's when I've had it. I did not touch it until now, but even though it just became a member of my permanent Steam backlog that I know is true for many people. Like people will impulse buy on Steam or buy things in sales, but definitely cannot play faster than they buy. I know I'm not alone in that strategy, if you can call it that.
Not at all.
Yeah, but Broken Age was right in there. And this was the perfect opportunity to play it. But we've thought about doing Broken Age for the podcast a couple times. It's been on our ideas board for quite a while, but this was exactly the right time for it. And I'm glad I did, because it really is I think it's beautiful. It's a beautiful game, both in its writing and its visuals. Like it's cozy in a way. Like the dialogue and the feelings that the game instills and the voice performances are like I don't think it's ever really. I don't know how to describe this. It just made me like nostalgia for a time I'd never experienced.
Yeah, that's a good way of describing it.
Yeah. So even though I don't have the adventure game pedigree of either of you, I think this game really harkens to a specific time and place, and it's quite wonderful.
Great.
I'm not sure if that asks your question exactly, but
I mean, yeah, just kind of like expectations, context going into it. Yeah.
Right. I expected an adventure game with of a certain stripe, and that's exactly what this is.
Perfect.
But I think that the changes from a game like Grim Fandango or Monkey Island is more with things like interface and visual choices, and not really gameplay or logic or writing.
And we'll go into all that a little bit more as we talk about the game itself. So next I wanted to, we talked a little bit about the Kickstarter. So why don't we kind of finish that discussion and talk a little bit about the setup of the game? Anything else you want to say about the development cycle of the documentary? I want to talk about the art a little bit.
Absolutely.
Because it's fantastic. So let's start with the development cycle. So as we briefly mentioned, the game ended up being split into two parts. And that was basically a product of kind of the way the Kickstarter was formatted, with Tim having to create this game from scratch and kind of figure out the scope of it as he went a little bit. And some of the stuff they were doing with the art and time crunch and things like that, it ended up being a much bigger game than they were expecting. Like we said, they were thinking of something like a step above a Flash game. And because of demand and all these expectations, that it turned into, they really wanted to make a project with a vast kind of beautiful scope. So it ended up being split into two parts.
Yeah, and that is painstakingly detailed in the documentary.
Yes.
This was not a decision that they went into lightly.
Ooh, no.
They tortured themselves over splitting it. I think one of the reasons why the game's development cycle, like we were saying, they thought it was just going to be like a very small game, one step above a Flash game. And then it turned out to be $3.3 million. They had all this money. They had this scope that they could, and they needed to essentially make enough to make the documentary worthwhile as well, because that was another part of it. And I think that because they didn't go into it with any ideas, they didn't go into it with any art style, they went into it with literally nothing except, let's make an adventure game. I think a lot of the first part of the development cycle was figuring out an engine, doing some prototypes, figuring out the art style, figuring out what the game was going to be about, and then Tim eventually writing the game. Mm-hmm. So a lot more time went into the pre-production of the game. And I think that possibly threw their sense of time scale off completely.
Oh, definitely. There was a lot of time spent on what exactly is this we're making.
Yeah.
Yeah, I have not seen the documentary, although now I definitely want to, having played more Schaefer than I ever have in my entire life the past month or so. Yeah, I'm roughly doubling my entire Schaefer oeuvre over in late September into October.
That's true.
But this is almost a positive example of feature creep. They thought they had no budget going into this, but then they were suddenly saddled with a non-trivial amount of money and some level of expectations to not let those backers down. So the scale of the game increased beyond their first estimate. And that's sometimes called feature creep, usually in a negative context. Like during development, the developers keep adding ideas and concepts, and then suddenly they have too many ideas or are failing to execute on all of the ideas to their satisfaction.
Right.
when too many ingredients go into the pot, that's sometimes called feature creep. But I think that this is a tightly made game. I don't think there's much that's wasted in it. And again, I've said this over and over. It's a really pretty game and a very well written game. I think their increase in scale and increase of what kind of game it wasn't really feature creeps as much as them just like setting a very specific ambition and then splitting it in half and extending the development cycle just to make sure they could properly execute on that ambition.
That's sort of the sense I got, is that they did pour a lot of, resources into planning to make sure that everything was, laid out. So you didn't get anything that looked like it was unfinished. And personally, I think that's the one thing I really like about Tim Schafer's work, and really like any of the LucasArts team, right? Like, if that vending machine with the grog is sitting there, like, there's actually a reason for it later. And you get this sense a little bit from Broken Age too. Like, I really do think they
Chekhov laid a lot of guns around these set pieces to go off.
Exactly.
One of the things that I found, I mean, the documentary is simply remarkable, not just because it's intriguing and interesting, it has a lot of interesting personalities in it, but also it gives you a look into like I've seen a lot of gaming documentaries from NoClip, etc., like those people, and they do an amazing job. I've never seen one that goes quite as in depth as this into the creative process that goes on behind the scenes with any kind of game development. Like, most of the stuff that is in this documentary is stuff that we will never find out because, like, a parent company would never let them release it. Like, we're seeing fights, we're seeing disagreements, we're seeing hard decisions being made. You get to see the game development is not easy. Sometimes it's not fun. It's incredibly stressful. You get to see crunch firsthand and what crunch does to people. Because literally between the beginning of the documentary and the end of documentary, some of these people look like they've aged like 5 years instead of 2. It's crazy.
And it's a lot of Tim, like, trying to find and keep useful people on his team for the development cycle. And it's...
Out of curiosity, before we get into the art, Hilary, who was your favorite character, quote unquote character in the documentary?
Oh, geez. Well, this actually segues nicely because I'm trying to remember his name and I might need to look him up, but the art director.
Lee.
Yes, Lee Petty.
Yes.
Yep. If I had to pick, like, I enjoyed his insights. I enjoyed his interactions with Tim.
Mm-hmm.
What about you?
I loved Anna.
Oh, yeah.
Anna was just a bright ray of sunshine throughout all of this. And like, you could tell that the project was wearing on her. And I also think that, like, at the beginning, her job was like putting Tim's dialogue into the game. But I think that by the end of it, you could tell that a lot more was being put on her than just about anyone else. She's the kind of person who, like, is the backbone of the studio. In my mind, like, without her, everything just would have fallen apart, even though she didn't specifically have like a job where she was a manager.
I could see it.
And she just seems like a genuinely cool person.
Yeah, I mean, it was a very likable group. Anyway.
Oh yeah, there was no one in the group who was like, but it was always funny when they introduced a new team member, because in my mind I was like, ooh, they're introducing a new character to the game, to the series, and I'm like, no, they're not introducing a new character. This is a documentary.
Yeah, just can't say enough good things about it.
Yeah, and then like some people like leave, like Ron Gilbert appeared briefly in like the first few episodes, and then he just leaves because he's done working on the cave, and they like show his empty office, and it felt like one of those like, your favorite character has left the building kind of thing.
Ron. Yeah. The footage of
Ron Gilbert stuff. Yeah.
Yep. It's sad empty office.
No, it's an exceptional documentary, and one of the reasons, like, you want to talk about is the art.
Yes. So a couple things about it I wanted to mention. So one of Tim's early ideas about the game is that he really liked an artist that he worked with, Nathan Bagel Stapley's art style. It was kind of surreal, but also had some nice kind of pastel-y colors. And it was a very interesting mix of styles that he had. And so one of Tim's early ideas was to kind of write the type of story that would fit well with his art style and kind of like feature his artwork. So that also made the project a lot more interesting because they didn't have a lot of ideas or, concepts, characters going into it. So they had to work with a whole team of artists while still kind of making it feel like Bagel's work. So it was a really interesting collaborative effort. I think Tim got a lot of story ideas from like early art jams early on. And you had like quite a few different distinctive artistic styles going into this that had to blend. So the fact that they got the visuals they did out of that is just amazing.
And the thing I found really cool about it is sometimes the art styles didn't work. They didn't blend. They didn't give what they needed. Like one of Tim Schafer's longtime collaborators, Peter Chan, who was responsible for like Monkey Island 2 and Day of the Tentacle and Full Throttle and Grim Fandango. Like they did an entire episode where they delved into his creative process and they went to his studio, and I thought that was one of my favorite episodes of the series, actually. But like in the end, his stuff didn't quite fit with what they were doing, and it was interesting because like he was just one of those people who kind of was in it and then who left again.
Yeah, he finished. He kind of made some contributions to the artwork, and then when that was done, he left.
Yeah, and I mean, Bagel's contribution is obvious. Like it was his at the very beginning. Like it wasn't Shay, but it kind of looked like Shay. It was like a lumberjack, not quite the hipster lumberjack, but it was a lumberjack character in the style of this, and that seems to be like where they really took their nod for the style of the characters.
Mm-hmm.
And then they built it off of that, and it's just it's such a fascinating look into the creative process that goes into a game. And because of the way this was designed, the Kickstarter was designed, and they didn't have anything prior to the Kickstarter. We got a real look into the pre-production process, which we never get, and that is so cool.
Mm-hmm. And that's especially true, like visuals as well as everything else.
Yeah,
and I think that was one of my favorites. And they ended up with a very beautiful, like kind of watercolory, sort of geometric to 2D, but slightly 3D sometimes, going through some of the environments style.
It's a 3D game technically, because you do explore like you explore more than just a 2D space, but it really does have a 2D picture book quality to it, just because of the texture of the characters and like the and sort of the softer color palette. It really feels like two like children's picture books, and I mean that with affection, that seem like they're set in unrelated worlds until that faded midpoint where Shay and Vela meet each other for the first time. And like the way you're talking about like treating developers of the game as characters, and details like early design choices and early versions of the protagonist of Broken Age. Like this is the kind of thing I'm used to seeing about games like a decade later.
Yeah, exactly.
Like you see the abandoned designs of Mr. Zubaz and the Karate Clown in the first couple Street Fighter games in like the 90s Street Fighter books. but now, because this documentary was made very intentionally during the development process, and everyone involved wanting to make the game good and the documentary good, we got this almost unprecedented level of access, or at least this just remarkable documentary alongside a remarkable game that just, I don't know, it makes the whole project feel a little more special.
I certainly think so.
I think so too. And I noticed something, maybe this is just my opinion, but when I was playing the game, and I was playing through Shay's stuff, and I was looking at Shay, and I was looking at like the way noses were done on the characters and like the shape of their heads and things like that. And it kind of occurred to me that maybe it was just because it was Elijah Wood portraying both characters, but there was something about it that evoked Over the Garden Wall for me.
Yeah.
Because it was like the character of the way that if you look at some of the art from Over the Garden Wall, it's like very simple cartoony, but like they have like geometric shapes for noses and things like that.
They do. Their face shapes are very geometric.
It just kind of looked like, it's not obvious. I think both were released in the same year, actually. But they don't look alike. But for me, it was just kind of one evoked the other. One looked like kind of a watercolor version of the other. And I thought that was neat, because I know you love Over the Garden Wall.
Yep.
And I do too.
And it's the right season for that too.
Yeah.
Yay.
Yeah, I'm glad that we worked in Over the Garden Wall into the Halloween season. Right. It's unbelievably good.
Very important. Well, that's a whole other thing, like going into the really cool voice acting as well.
Yeah, they get some good people.
Yeah, I mean, I have had a little bit of well, let's say I've done multiple double takes over the voice work here, because I mentioned before how I was playing Psychonauts 2 at the same time as this, so I'm getting a double dose of Jack Black there. But
Yep.
I'm also, Jono, you've been doing this too. I've also been playing a lot of Mass Effect over the past couple of
Uh-huh.
months, and we have Fem Shep voicing Shay's mom.
Yeah.
Jennifer Hale has been a pro in the industry for decades.
You will appreciate how she's represented in the documentary then, because everyone is like so excited to meet her.
Yeah, she's been around forever, and she does a really good job here. But it's a little bit, it's like, I was just playing a game with Jennifer Hale in it. I was just playing a game with Jack Black in it. So it was just a lot of unusual coincidences.
I was just watching an adorable cartoon miniseries with Elijah Wood in it.
Mm-hmm.
And I was oh boy, I'm playing Fem Shep in a very different tone than Jennifer Hale's mom in this game. Let's just say.
Interesting.
Mm-hmm. And I mean, other actors in this include like Will Wheaton of Star Trek: The Next Generation fame.
Yeah, he's Curtis the hipster lumberjack, right?
He sure
Yes.
is.
Yeah, and the voice actor for Raz from Psychonauts is a minor character. He's one of the villagers in the Cloud City.
Yeah, and then we have Vela's voice actress, who is a relative newcomer, but I think does a fantastic job. Like, I couldn't imagine anyone else voicing Vela.
I think hers is the best voice performance in the whole game. Like, she's it feels like it becomes the character, and I think Vela's level of like spunk without being overly energetic. And
that's
like
exactly
and
it.
yeah, and like sarcasm and like cool sarcasm without ever seeming mean.
Mm-hmm.
Was very fun and fitting, and I think that Elijah Wood's performance is really good, but I almost think like he was toning himself down a little bit, like trying to make Shay deliberately a little bored and jaded,
Mm-hmm.
But not in a bad way. Like Elijah Wood, both performances are great, but I thought that the most appealing voice performance in the game was Vela's.
Which is really funny because there is a section of the documentary where Tim Schafer and his vocal casting agent, are going through like various samples trying to find the right voice for Vela. And he's like, I want a teenage girl. And she's like, no, you don't. You do not want a teenage girl to play this. I'll give you some examples why. And she like plays a couple of actual teenage girls who are like kind of like, they're like teenagers. They're just like, there's a vaguely whiny quality about them. And he's like, nope, don't want that. And they found like the perfect person who evoked the qualities that of being a teenager without actually being one. I agree, though. I think Vela's the best voice actor in the entire piece.
I mean, there's a reason that there's 11 or 12 teenage main characters in Greece, but only one of the actors in Greece was actually under 20 years old. It's like when you say you want a teenager, you don't always want a teenager.
No, you want a 20-year-old who looks and sounds like a teenager.
Exactly.
Oh, jeez.
Or in the case of Stockard Channing, a 30-year-old that's a good singer, but maybe doesn't look like a teenager.
All right. Anything else we want to say kind of about like the setup or the background of the game before we go through the plot?
No, I think I'm good.
Okay. All right. So part one. One of the neat features of Broken Age that I think they employ more in the second half of the game than the first half of the game is that you have Shay and you have Vela. Vela's a teenage girl. Shay's a teenage boy. They are in very different circumstances. And at the beginning of the game, you get a lovely title screen with Shay in his spaceship environment and Vela in her kind of like pastoral, almost fairy tale environment. And you have to pick whose story you start with. So there's this whole mechanic of being able to switch back and forth between the two of them. So who did you all pick first?
I can't remember who I went with the first time. This time I went with Vela.
Me too.
I also went with Vela first.
All right. The very first time I played, I did Shay's story first, at least in the first half.
I think playing through Vela's first actually helps a lot with Shay's, because I felt this time I knew what was happening. I knew the big twist this time.
Mm-hmm.
But I was like, I could put the pieces together playing Shay's game and like have like an idea of, wait a second, these creatures, the same thing is happening when I get these creatures as it happened with Vela's situation.
Mm-hmm. There are little details. Hey, these ship windows, the shape of them looks
Yeah.
kind of familiar.
I was expecting something like that, but I'm not gonna lie and say I figured it out. It's uh we can say what the twist is in a moment, but I figured that these two occupied the same world somehow, even though they were part of very different worlds. But I did not, I guess correctly in how they were connected. But I'm glad that they didn't try to make it too much a secret that the Maiden's Feast is a sacrifice, because the way they were like talking about how much of an honor it was, I like at the very beginning of Bella's story. Again, this is 5 minutes in. I'm going, is she about to be sacrificed?
Yep.
I bet she's about to be sacrificed. This feels like Shirley Jackson's The Lottery a little bit.
A little
then,
too much. Yeah.
but then they make it pretty clear that that is indeed what it is, and
Yep.
but it's normalized and even celebrated in Bella's community.
Yeah, I mean the game starts with Vela up on the hill, just kind of nodding off, getting some time to herself, and her sister calls back to the house for a celebration because Vela's been selected to be part of this very special Maiden's Feast, which is supposed to be an honor because you're performing an important service for the community. And it turns out that this important service is basically presenting yourself to a giant, what kind of looks like some sort of Cthulhu tentacle monster called a Mog, to be seemingly eaten.
Mhm.
And this is done in somewhat cheeky style. The town that Vela's from is called Sugar Bunting, where they are bakers. But if you talk to Vela's surly yet wonderful grandpa, you find out it used to be called Steel Bunting. And he's kind of the one wondering, like, why don't we fight the Mogs? But anyway, so their Maiden's Feast is fancy cakes. Everyone's dress is a fancy cake. They're standing there in fancy cake dresses, waiting to be sacrificed.
And eventually, you go to other villages adjacent to Vela's, and in the Sky Village where they all tend to birds, the maidens for the Maiden Feast are dressed in bird costumes or very feathered costumes, and in the seaside town, they're all in where they're clearly mostly fishermen or perhaps sand architects.
Yep.
They dress in elaborate fish costumes. So like there is centuries of tradition of these Maidens Feasts every 14 years. With multiple girls from every village being given to a Mog Chothra monster.
Right. You can tell that it's been going on for a while. The officiator in Vela's town, says, like, this is a proud tradition. And she remembers it from when she was young. And you can tell she's supposed to be quite old. So, generations of this happening. So very interesting. And I think kind of vexing to Vela, like, why hasn't anyone ever tried to fight the Mogs? And she asks this and no one really answers. So what ends up happening at the Maiden Feast is you get like a cool little series of kind of like dialogue and a few inventory object puzzles. You have to kind of trade items between the girls to get yourself out of your cake and incapacitate Mog Chothra. And that's how you end up in Mariloft. You take a fall and then one of the Mariloft birds, I think, grabs you. So you end up in the Cloud Village, which is, what do you think of the management in Mariloft?
The cult, or not the cult, the religion, philosophy, the philosophy. Yeah, Jack Black's great in that. And it's full of characters, and like there's some of the people living in this village are like full in on this cult mentality of weightlessness and lightness in the clouds. And others are somewhat more skeptical and cynical about it all. Understandably so, we find out later.
And some of them are really cool foils to each other. Like, I like even the side characters in this game, like Walter. By the way, Harmony Lightbeard is the leader of this area, and he has a habit of shortening people's names because that makes them lighter. So Walter's kind of just like all in on this cult, doesn't see a problem with it, kind of believes it, despite the fact that his wife and other members of his family are less sure. And then you have Fathur, Harmony Lightbeard's guard, who's just kind of adorably devoted.
Yeah, he's the ironically he's Harmony's heavy.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and Harmony Lightbeard does lead a cult of lightness in the Cloud Village, but they still have to give up their maidens to Mog Chothra, and there's a girl in the village, Twyla, who was one of the maidens presented for Mog Chothra, but wasn't chosen, and she feels like a failure as a result. But and when Vela is talking to Twyla for the first time, Vela is like encouraging. It's like, yeah, that means we survived. That means we can fight. And Twyla's like, well, yeah, but I mean, I was supposed to get eaten, and people have been telling me for years that it's such an honor to.
Is there something wrong with me?
Yeah, exactly. It was heartbreaking. I
It
loved
was.
Twyla.
I felt for Twyla. I really did. And she has such a cool outfit.
I want the best for Twyla.
Yep. And I think Vela does too.
And there are other characters in here like Gus, who does not want to lose a letter of his name because he's afraid that people will start referring to him as Gas.
Oh, and then the unsung hero, I think, of this game, Carol or Carl.
Yeah.
She's the wife. She spends most of her time making cloud shoes, which you do need to solve some of the puzzles and make sure you don't sink through the clouds in Mariloft.
Yeah, the cloud shoes, which are basically, snowshoes but for clouds, they show up in like every part of the game.
Yeah.
They are a crucial puzzle element.
They really are. And then later on she helped solve a different set of puzzles later on in the game. And we'll get to that, which is consistently helpful.
The thing I love about Tim Schafer's writing is, like we were talking about Chekhov's gun, like he sets things up beautifully. And there are little hints in the dialogue. This game is so dialogue heavy. Like, you could, if you are the kind of player who doesn't want to talk and doesn't want to exhaust dialogue trees, you're not going to be able to complete all the puzzles, because in some cases you're not going to be able to get all of the items required to complete the puzzles. You're not going to get items that are necessary to move forward.
Right.
You need to listen to everything. So in this case, like, Harmony is as high above Mariloft as Mariloft is above the ground. So to get to him, you have to climb a massive ladder up, and your goal here is to try to get to the ground. So just through listening to dialogue cues, you're like, all right, so there's this ladder that's as high up. So that's the distance of Mariloft to the ground. I have to get this ladder down somehow. And
that's the cue. That's all it is you knowing that it's an equal distance. And that's supposed to cue you so that you know, okay, that ladder needs to come down.
Yeah, this ladder is my way down. So when you figure out his obsession with lightness, and if you check the first golden egg you find in your inventory, they comment on how it's both an offering and it's also quite a heavy item. That the game is telling you to use those golden eggs to weigh down the ladder. But if you don't check your inventory or exhaust a lot of dialogue trees, there's no way of knowing that.
And I think, we mentioned a little bit of this game kind of being in the like old school adventure game puzzle solving category. And I think that's a part of it. We'll get into how like the puzzle solving changes
between the acts.
Mm-hmm. Yep. One of the things is that we're saying all this about like dialogue trees and cues, but this is allegedly the easy half.
It is the easy half.
Yeah.
I never got stuck in this first half of the game. I thought most of the puzzles were fairly straightforward, partially because of the interface, whereas this is, they talk about this in the documentary, this is going to be an evolution of the adventure game. They didn't want to go backwards. They didn't want to go backwards to verbs, or even a verb coin. Like, they were going for a single cursor that does everything. So it's not like you have to figure out, it's not a grammar simulator. You don't need to figure out which verb works with which item.
Do I need to use this or push it? Yeah, no.
Exactly. No, it was just like, if you click on something, it tells you what it is. You use item on this by dropping and dragging it. And it was very, very streamlined.
Yeah. Every button is basically, or every click is basically interact. And it's a very simple interface that was not complicated for me to use at all.
Well, for the sake of time, let's keep moving on with the plot. So you figure out how to get Harmony's ladder down, and you kind of crash into Curtis the Lumberjack's house, which brings us to the next area, which is his house and Shellmound, the sea town. So Vela navigates that. She makes a talking tree extremely sick because she needs the sap to solve some puzzles.
Talking Tree is my favorite character in the game, I think.
Oh my gosh.
I will tell you, I have two favorite characters, but they don't show up until Shay's part, so we'll get to them soon. But yeah, the Talking Tree that vomits sap and loves corny tree jokes is pretty good.
And hates murderous humans, especially the lumberjack.
Yeah, he's a tree rights advocate.
Yeah, but you need to collect some sap, and and basically help build a sand castle
to
and
get Shellmound ready for their Maiden's Feast. So Vela's idea at this point is to intercept Mog Chothra and beat him at Shellmound. And she also discovers the Deadeye Pyramid and the Deadeye Druids, which, when you solve their riddle, you can enter the Deadeye Pyramid and you find a spaceman, essentially, kind of guy, who helps you create a weapon to take down Mog Chothra. So once you get Shellmound ready for their Maiden's Feast, which includes the sap from the tree to build sandcastles, to reinforce them, and getting some perfume that's made from some kind of gross, like, fish chum.
Yeah, you need to. This is a seaside town, so their idea of attracting a monster, you need to vaguely smell a fish.
Yep. And the girls go on about like their, traditional generations old, like, recipes of essentially like fish scent.
As a man who grew up in Nova Scotia, I can confirm that this is indeed true. Yes. Every family has a monster attracting recipe that is mostly fish. It's tradition.
There you go. See, I don't think Colorado was quite Mariloft, although it is the birthplace of all the birds in Terranigma.
So, Sollosi, would that mean you're from Sugar Bunting?
I don't know. I'm from the DC area, so it's a little bit Chesapeake Harbor town, but a lot of contractors and bureaucrats. So I feel like I'm more the Plague Dam than Sugar Bunting.
Oh no. And we'll get more to that shortly. So
yes,
there's an exciting finale to Act 1 where the Deadeye God manages to repurpose some parts from his spaceship to make a weapon to incapacitate Mog Chothra. Vela distracts Mog Chothra and they fight him off. He crashes to the ground, and then, who wants to say the big twist?
Oh, we are not at the big twist yet, because then as soon as it crashes to the ground, we switch over to Shay.
Oh, yeah, Shay. Oh, shoot, yeah. No, we have to talk about Shay in the first half.
No, Shay wakes up, which I actually think is kind of a cool misdirect, because the way that is designed, I think it's designed both ways. The last thing that happens in either one of the stories in Act 1 is immediately followed by either Shay or Vela waking up. Mm-hmm. So if you didn't know what's going to happen, it almost makes you think like that was a dream of the other character.
Yeah.
Because you're kind of trying to figure out, okay, why are we on a spaceship now? Like, Vela's world is a vaguely nonsensical fantasy world, and Shay's is a vaguely nonsensical sci-fi world, but there's no crossover that we can see. So we start looking for clues about, like, okay, well, how are these two stories connected?
Right. So you get this twist with Vela. She's fighting off Mog Chothra. I think she falls, right? Yeah. And then Shay wakes up, and you're on the spaceship, and you're starting his story.
Yeah, and most of Shay's story is sort of communicating the repetition of his life. Because he's extremely bored about everything going on around him. He's fed cereal every day. His mom sort of runs his schedule during the day, and his dad runs his schedule during the night. But basically, his mom and dad appear to be AIs represented by a fake sun and moon. Which are really pretty, by the way. It's a beautiful effect. But it's also like he feels like, even though he's I presume in his earlier mid-teens, everything around him is so childish. Like the controls of the ship are obviously just toys. There's even like there's even like a little baby airmobile above him of the planets, and all of the missions that he does to practice and to train to presumably for a mission that's presumably coming. They're all robots made of yarn and like storybook fairy tale areas, and the missions themselves are ridiculous. Like you have to poke a mountain to make it open its mouth and stick out its tongue so the train can be saved. Like
to create a bridge. Yeah. So there's like the train mission.
And it's clear that there are only 4 of these missions, and Shay has been doing them every day for several years. So like,
and you get a great dialogue tree with Mom. And it's sort of like, well,
Mom is so encouraging but also so coddling that you like see sort of how cute and sweet it is, but also feel Shay's struggle a little bit.
And you feel his increasing frustration.
Yeah. And monotony of every day being the same.
Yep.
And that's sort of the point, which is if you're not figuring out, if you can't figure out a solution, yeah, it can feel a little monotonous, but that's what they're trying to do at that point.
Exactly. So once that is effectively communicated, you have to figure out a way to break that monotony.
Yep. And then you do, and then everything changes
Everything
with the
changes.
arrival of, it turns out that this is not Gilbert Wolf Schaefer Wolf. This is Gilbert Wolf Wolf Wolf.
That's true.
That's right. Yeah, I would. But when I coined that term back in the Secret of Monkey Island episode, I was not aware of any wolves in Broken Age.
So it's Gilbert Wolf Wolf Wolf.
Gilbert Triple Wolf.
So what ends up happening is the answer is to mess with the train mission so that the train falls off the tracks and you and your little adorable knitted yarn pals fall. And then you meet a mysterious wolf character who's been hiding out in the unseen parts of the ship named Merrick. And he tells you that it's time to put away childish things and kind of plays to Shay's, desire for freedom and desire to have an impact on the world around him. And so he sends you on these missions. He says that the galaxy's at war and you have to rescue hapless creatures. And so there are like 3 of these missions where you have to use the ship's navigation system, which is the Space Weaver and the Nav Scarf, to go to certain locations, kind of pick up these individuals without mom and dad finding out, essentially. So that's the next part of his story. But then this becomes like increasingly difficult. And the last time you do it, I think the ship is kind of getting wise to you a little bit. So you have to do several things to be able to like use the ship's boom arm effectively. You have to dampen the ship's core so you can lower the shields manually, because Merrick can't like hack the computer system as effectively as he could before.
Yeah, and Merrick convincing Shay to do all these tasks is so exciting and different from Shay's usual routine that he really goes into them with aplomb.
Yep.
But basically, it's doing several things around the ship without mom or dad noticing, and then resulting in playing this mini game where you rescue like little digital creatures.
It's like a digital claw game.
I've played 8 or 9 Yakuza games, or I should say Like a Dragon games over the past 2 years, and they were all leading to this moment.
So those little segments were super easy for you.
Oh yeah.
I totally bought this too, because you quickly learn that based on the little that you've learned about Shay's mission and the training exercises that Shay has been on, Shay has been quote unquote trained to be a hero. Like he's been told his entire life that he's a hero and that he is rescuing people and that he is selfless and brave. And as Shay grows up, he knows that this is just crap because these are staged missions that are not in any way dangerous and he's not actually saving anybody. And then all of a sudden, for the first time, he's told that he is important, that he actually is a hero and that he can make a difference. So I really felt for Shay here. I completely bought his enthusiasm and drive to save these little creatures.
It is a really kind of nice narrative setup. Like the idea that, so the little bit of background that you learn about Shay's ship, the Bassa Nostra, is that it is a seeding ship, essentially. Like he's been fed this story about how his world is dying and how he and his AI-ish parents, their mission is to just kind of continue to live. And so they're looking for somewhere, a suitable place for him to live, essentially.
But this is not true.
Yeah, I think it's called, it's called Operation Dandelion or Mission Dandelion. I think it's because of the way dandelions spread out their seeds by having them, catch on the wind and float to find fertile ground. But that's not the case at all. No. When the last creature you try to rescue is not as cooperative, the ship crashes, and if you've completed Vela's story at this time, like it goes back to Vela and the ship opening, and it's Shay and Vela facing each other because like the creatures were the maidens, the ship is Mog Chothra, and neither Shay, but Shay didn't know a thing about Vela or her people, and Vela wasn't even aware that Mog Chothra was a ship and not a monster.
And in this shocking moment, Vela tries to punch him.
Understandably.
But the punch whiffs, and Vela stumbles into the ship, and Shay stumbles out of the ship. And when part 2 begins, it's Vela navigating Shay's space and Shay navigating Vela's space.
So, all right, I guess that means we're ready for part 2.
A little bit. Can I mention something about part 1?
Oh yeah, of course.
For me, something that Tim Schafer did with Day of the Tentacle, which is similar to this, is you could switch between characters freely. But in Day of the Tentacle, you would have to get items as one character and transfer them to the other, and so there was a lot of crossover between the two characters.
Mm-hmm.
In this game, part 1 anyway, there is no crossover between the characters. You complete one, then you complete the other. But I found, not this time because I remembered the puzzle solutions, but the first time I found being able to switch characters was very helpful, because it's an adventure game. You get stuck, and sometimes it can feel like you're hitting your head off of a talkative tree. So being able to switch over to another character and maybe solve some completely unrelated puzzles on the other side was a big relief, and it gave me a chance to give me a break from the frustration until I get stuck on that side. Then I could switch back over to the other and give that another try. So I thought this switching back and forth, it was useful, but it felt very disconnected as compared to some other adventure games, which I feel they rectified in the second half.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. Like it does kind of have some use, just if you have some burnout on one story versus the other, or if you are stuck, or if you get sick of Mariloft.
I mean, my personal way of interpreting that is that's why I almost always play more than one video game at a time. Like if I always keep 2 or 3 games in rotation instead of focusing at one at a time, because if I get bored or stuck in one, switching can really re-energize me. But I think that's a deliberate choice. In the first half of Broken Age, they're hiding the fact that these worlds are connected. And it's a plot twist when there's that moment of truth when the door on the ship opens. But in the second half, they're emphasizing the connections, and you have to find clues in one setting to solve puzzles in the other setting, unless you brute force it or look up a solution, which happened to me at least once.
Because there is a bit of a difficulty spike in the second half of the game.
Yeah.
And I think it's maybe a little harder if you do as I did and go with Vela's story first.
Yes.
Because there's more clues in Shay's route to help Vela than the other way around, I found.
I started with Shay's in the second half. I don't know if maybe like vaguely remembered that from the last time I played the game.
I would have had an easier time in the second half if I did a little bit more frequent switching. But I played as much of Vela's route as I could before switching to Shay, and that was not the best decision.
I think again, I don't think it's a bad thing in terms of the structure. I do think that Act 1 having no crossover between the characters genuinely does train the player, if they're not familiar with adventure games, to not realize that there can be crossovers of information, if not items, in the second half of the game, which can lead, as I understand it, I looked some things up. It can lead to a lot of players feeling extremely stuck because the information that they need is in the other character's route.
Yeah.
And they don't think there is any crossover, but there is. There absolutely is. There has to be. And that's certainly in the finale, where the finale is both characters at the same time, almost.
Yeah, that's an example. And if you kind of have some context, or definitely it sounds like if you play Day of the Tentacle, you kind of have a cue or like some idea. Maybe they're able to trade items, or maybe there's some information about this.
I think that from a story game, from an immersion perspective, it does bother me very slightly that to solve certain puzzles, Shay and Vela have to have information that is literally impossible for them to know.
No, or communicate with one another. Yeah.
Or communicate with one another. That bothered me a little bit. It didn't upset me, but I was like, okay, yeah, but there's literally no way for Shay to know how to rewire the hexapal? Yeah. Without having the information that's on the photo of the whiteboard in the background in Vela's route. Like, there's no way possible. There's no way for Vela to know what the coordinates are if you don't put the notes together, so to speak.
Yeah, but before you can go into the control room, you have to pass Mom's test because part of it is that Vela has to convince Mom that she's Shane the cheese Shay to get into the door. And one of the questions is, what was the name of Shay's old pet snake, or like old stuffed snake toy? And there's no way you can know that unless you've done the sequence with Shay where he meets a snake and calls it Mr. Huggles. Or is it Huggies?
It's Mr. Huggy.
Yeah, Mr. Huggy. That's
Mr.
it. That's
Huggy.
it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So like there is, and I didn't know that. I was doing Vela's route first, so I guessed wrong twice before guessing the right one, and I just kept repeating. I just kept repeating the questionnaire from Mom until I got the right answers, because I got one of the right answers from looking at things in the trophy room, but I didn't know Mr. Huggy, so I had to guess a couple times. But like if you switch frequently and explore thoroughly, the clues are there, but they're not very clear. And I think this is where adventure game logic bites you in the ass a little bit. I've said the words adventure game logic like 15 times every episode this month, but it's a very specific way of your brain operation where they make sense when it's explained to you, but is a little confusing in the moment, and sometimes difficult to find until you rub every object you have against every other object you have.
Exactly. And if you play enough adventure games, you kind of train yourself to maybe be able to hone in on the important details that will come up.
It's like if you don't really understand Zelda instincts, like go to every unexplored room and try to just search objects for pushable blocks or dings in the wall. Like you don't understand all of those Zelda strategies until you've played a couple Zelda games, and you developed instincts about video games and RPGs and all of these things that make total sense if it's your fifth video game of that genre, but none if you're a newcomer. And adventure game has their own language and logic that I think is learned and not obvious, which is my way of explaining that I had to use a guide a lot in part 2. In both the Shane, I keep calling him Shane. That's my bad. In both the Shay in the Shay route and the Vela route. And there was I accidentally called Vela Vala like 20 times because there's in an online game I used to play, one of the main characters was named Vala, so I accidentally, maybe I've accidentally called her Vala today.
I don't think you did.
I don't think you have either.
Oh, that's lucky. But basically, Vala's thrust for her part is
you did it there.
Whoops. Yeah. Okay. I knew it was coming. Yeah. Vela's goal is to get into the control room and then find a way to like plant an explosive outside the ship and then get the hell out of there, while Shay is searching around the last 2 villages of Vela's route from part 1 and find the equipment that Alex needs to make repairs to his ship, which is a buried Mog Chothra, we know now.
Yes. An earlier model.
Yeah, an earlier model, because Alex went into cryo sleep. We already mentioned all that.
Yeah.
And so basically they both have multiple tasks that can be done in a couple different orders, but they get real weird and hyper specific in how to accomplish them.
Stupid hexapal.
And, okay, I really appreciated the moment, like just really quickly when Shay and Shay's dad. Oh yeah, another important thing about Shay's route is that he gets to meet and interact with his dad in a face-to-face way.
Who's not an AI.
He's not an AI.
And well, similar for Vela, like you discover that Shay's mom is in fact a human woman and not an AI.
In the control room, which is in the first half, is the room where, her sun form appears on the door and says, "Oh, you can't come in here. I'm making a surprise for you."
Yeah, it turns out that Shay has not seen his parents for probably a couple of years. Enough time that he forgot they're real people.
Yeah, there's something like really messed up and lonely about the whole arrangement.
Yep.
And you don't learn it until towards the end of the game in Vela's route, where she basically she overhears a discussion between Merrick and Merrick's boss, and then interrogates Merrick's boss directly over a computer console. But it looks like that Lorune, the area that the metropolis that Shay is from, has 2 races of people, like the Thrush and normal humans, and the Thrush capture young women from the Badlands or everywhere outside
the Plague Lands.
Yeah, the Playgrounds or the Badlands, everywhere outside Lorune, to get healthy human DNA to contribute to their genome to make the thrush bloodline as pure as possible, and they look like bizarre aliens. And you discover that Merrick was a thrush in disguise, and the granny lady in Vella's home village was a thrush in disguise.
Yep, she's working the plague lands angle of it and staying in Sugar Bunting and encouraging this tradition of the Maiden's Feast.
Yeah, no, basically embedding herself in these villages to make the Maiden's Feast a celebrated tradition, but it's all just a cover up for a weird eugenics plot.
I never liked her from like the very beginning of Vella's story, but that was just like insidious. Ugh.
I thought that maybe they were being captured to be married into a society or thrown into servitude or something, but the answer was actually worse than my guess.
Harvest them, and Vella responds as you would expect, which is with absolute disgust.
Mm-hmm.
Just, ugh.
Warned.
And I should mention my favorite character makes their appearance at the end of Shay's part 1 and then at the beginning of Vella's part 2. Dutch the knife.
Oh, gosh.
Like the knife. The AI knife, fork, and spoon in Shay's kitchen all have their own personalities and rivalries and everything, and the knife is a homicidal maniac who is just a delight.
Shay drops him at the end of his part 1, and I think his response is, "I'm free to cleave the imminent void of the universe," as he flies away.
And then Dutch the knife dives onto Vella. She dodges him and picks him up, and Dutch fully believes that the ship just being destroyed is due to his own attempts at cleaving space in two. It's very funny and quirky, and I love all the silly robots in this game, like the cleaning robot that you have to babysit through part of Vella's part 2.
Aww, she's
and
so sweet.
And Hexapal and Hexagal, even though wiring them is frustrating, I just love
they're so cute.
I love how cute they are. And my second favorite character of the game is Gary the grabbing robot.
Grabbing Gary.
Mm-hmm. Grabbing Gary is excellent. Is an excellent zero dialogue character.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Gary, no.
He even does the thumbs up like Arnold Schwarzenegger in Terminator 2.
He does. And you bet, like, when Shay has the choice of, like, who to be upset about at the beginning of his part 2, I chose Gary. I mean...
Yeah, this game is so quirky and so specific that it's endearing me to silent robots and a very talkative knife.
It really comes together. And it's even more impressive when you consider that Tim Schafer had not written part 2 when part 1 was released. He was working on it, but it was not written. And that's kind of scary, because when you're writing a work that is eventually going to be one piece, like, yeah, it was released in 2 episodes at the time, but once part 2 got released, it was going to be a single game.
Right.
And that means that he wrote the first half of the game, and once that was out there, he couldn't change anything. He was locked in at that point to the choices that he made. Narratively, character-wise, like everything was set. So everything that he did in the second half needed to work around that. And that constraint may have actually created a little bit more creativity from him. But still, that's got to be scary for a writer.
Yeah.
And then, like, I think that when it all comes together, because everyone's been waiting for this to come together, where it's like Shay and Vella both need to work together. Even if they're not together, they need to work together in order to save the day. So, like, the final location, once both Mogs are at the plague dam and they're like ramming into each other.
Oh yeah. So just to kind of like quickly catch up and explain. So what happens is one of Vella's first actions in the spaceship, actually, you find out that Mog Chothra is heading back to the plague dam. And so Shay's whole reason he's investigating the surrounding areas is to get Alex's ship up and running so that he can follow the Bassa Nostra and find his mom, because his mom is with Vella.
Yeah. Shay's goal is to return to Lorune and rescue his mom, while Vella's goal is to escape with Shay's mom from Lorune.
Lorune.
Loruna. Yeah, Loruna?
Mm-hmm. I think it's Loruna.
It's Loruna? Yep. I've been saying it wrong the whole time. Yeah, Lorule is the opposite of Hyrule from The Legend of Zelda: Link Between Worlds. I'm just terrible with names. I've gotten worse with every new podcast.
It's okay.
But yeah, because their goals are opposite trajectories. When you solve the first, let's say, 3/4 of Shay's part 1, Shay's part 2, and Vela's part 2, the two ships crash into each other, and the grand finale is like rescuing everyone on both ships and getting out of there before everyone's destroyed, which is raises the stakes considerably. It also makes the wiring puzzles at the end of the game all the more annoying.
Yeah.
Because it's like there's two wiring configurations, one that makes the little hexapal and hexagal swing their arms, and one that makes them raise their arms, and you have to discover what each code is, and have one hexapal raise their arms to play a harp, and while the other hexagal needs to swing their arms for a flashlight. And then once you discover the configuration of each wiring, you need to have them switch. So the flashlight swinging one is raising their arms to tickle the the Weaver robot that programs the star charts.
Space
and
Weaver.
and then the hexapal on Shay's side needs to change from raising their arms to swinging their arms, so they can switch from playing a harp to playing a drum to distract Alex, so you can do the final move that's required to beat the game. It's
You need to get the adults out of the way.
Yeah, the wiring puzzle is a little hard, especially since it's not hard coded into the game. The swing pattern and the raise arms pattern is randomly determined at the beginning of the game, and you have to solve it find out what it is for yourself.
And anyone familiar with the genre, we ran into this with Monkey Island. Even the safe code.
That's right. Yeah.
Is not hard coded. It changes every time. I think the last time I ran into this playing a game was Riven. Actually, there's like a number sequence that, like, the way the numbers work and the symbols for the numbers stays consistent, but the specific 4-digit code changes every playthrough.
The last time I ran into this was outside of Secret of Monkey Island, was when I played AI the Somnium Files Nirvana initiative over the summer, because there's a special code you get as a secret in the epilogue, and if you take that code, go to an earlier part of the game and enter it, you get that's how you unlock the secret ending in post game. But it's randomly determined, and you can't just use a hard coded number. My code had 747 in it, so it's like, oh, I got the airplane code, hooray!
I was totally fine with the idea of rewiring and like the general concept. I just felt that it was, once you figured it out, you could always figure it out, but it was still time consuming and just a pain in the butt to constantly be switching back and forth. Yep. It was not a very user friendly puzzle.
Yeah, because each robot has their 6 nodes in different positions, and you have to, and there's no way to know what, like, each node has a symbol associated with it, so you have to do the wiring, plug the robot into the charging machine. It'll show you what wirings correspond to what nodes. And so it's basically just, you have to use some substitution pictography. Maybe taking notes would help, but there's nothing on the robots themselves that tells you what to do, except that I think it's Vela's robot does have one of the codes like in the robot because of the pattern of explosions on its back when it was damaged. Is how you find out one of them. But it's complicated, and it requires a lot of like scene switching and some annoying inventory management. But I figured it out.
Yeah, I feel like there could have been an easier way. Like, once you figure out the puzzle, there could have been a way just to switch the modes for the various robots without having to do the puzzle again.
Or even just like after you solve it once, the node symbols appear on the robot. That would have helped hugely.
Yeah, and you could just switch it back and forth that way. It would have, because you've already solved it at that point, it just kind of becomes a pain.
That's one of the tricky things about a lot of older adventure games, is some of the puzzles did have a ton of repetition.
Yeah, but their mission statement was they didn't want this to be like old adventure games. They wanted this to be modern interface moving forward, and in
many ways they do that, but this is...
Oh, in very many ways they do that, just not this way.
And I think in some old adventure games, you're really burdened with inventory items that are useless or red herrings, that maybe stick around too long, but there's no wasted space at all in Broken Age. Like
Mm-mm.
every item in your inventory will be used later until the final couple puzzles where each character maybe has 2 or 3 items with 2 of them being robots. So,
Yeah.
so it's like I towards the end of Secret of Monkey Island, like I had to go to like an extra 5th and 6th line of items, and I'm thinking to myself the whole time, it's like, oh man, which of these do I need to remember, and which one of these are going to be useless? But in Broken Age, there was no wasted inventory space. I never felt like I was overwhelmed by them throwing too much at once, because the goals were always clear and the play space was always clear, but the logic of like when the swinging robot had to become a tickling robot, and the Weaver robot, it would be tickled if you put the robot down, like that was not clear. I needed some guidance there.
Yeah.
But in how in the bones and engine of how the game moved, I thought was really, really smartly designed.
I think so too. I think it was a remarkably effective adventure game, and with some great characters. And I mean, the resolution at the end of the game was, I thought, somewhat satisfying, actually.
Oh, it's adorable. Like Shay like reunites with his human parents. Vela reunites with her family, and the family is glad that she's survived and not upset about the sacrifice
Oh
stuff.
my gosh, and they build up to that so beautifully. Like I'm glad I have an in to talk about this. So in Shay's second half, you meet every single member of Vela's family looking for her, and they're all kind of like reacting to her absence in different ways.
And my homegirl Twyla helps him build a radiation suit. I was
Yeah.
you go, girl. I am rooting for Twyla. I
Yeah.
really am.
And so is Vela's mom. And you get a really sweet scene with Vela's mom, obviously also, feeling for Twyla and like trying to give her advice. And then depending on your responses, Shay can be a little bit nicer or a little less nice to her.
Look, as a 36-year-old man, I know that it's a little bit hard to make friends when you're not in your 20s anymore. So seeing like these adults trying to take care of their kids and then becoming friends in adorable post-credit scenes, I just loved every second of it. It was a very wholesome set of ending scenes with just families supporting each other. You love to see it.
Yeah, and satisfying narrative development with the Plagueland denizens. Like Vela's mom has a really sweet moment where she's like, she sums everything up basically. She says, I can't believe we went along with this tradition. This has been going on for so long, and no one, like, it's kind of dawning on her, like, why didn't anyone try to stop it? And she finally just goes, I wish Vela were here so I could tell her how proud I am of her. And it's just like, oh.
No, and that's another example of the acting being right on point for the entire game.
Yeah, no, the writing and the voice performances, I never got tired of any of them. We mentioned that you have to exhaust every line of dialogue and with certain characters to get to the next puzzle point.
Tim Schafer is going to make damn sure that you hear his dialogue.
Yeah. I never got tired of it though. It's like this is good writing and good voice performances, and I think and even though the game has weird parts to it, it all felt very earnest. I really liked the. I mean, adventure games, I think, need to have good dialogue and good writing to really succeed, and this absolutely succeeds.
And I think reutilizing all of the settings from the first act, but recontextualizing them and the characters that we met in the last act was very, very smart. Some people, as I understand, complained about that, but I thought that was terrific.
Yeah, I thought it was clever. It's. I mean, they use. You're exploring everything in a different context and different characters, and but the story still moves, and I believe that the stakes of part 2 are very clear and higher than part 1. I understand being frustrated that with part 1 and part 2 being separate releases. I mean we lived that a little bit with The Wolf Among Us last week. Like there's something frustrating about not being able to play the game at your own pace. But as storytelling goes, I thought that switching settings was really cool.
Narratively, I thought it made sense, and it played to the team's strengths, I think.
And it ended on a cliffhanger, which was good. I mean, a lot of weight. The wait is always excruciating, but the resolution is nice when you get a good cliffhanger.
Mm-hmm.
When you get a Vela stuck in the morgue or Riker saying, "Mr. Worf, fire." Like that, it really does set you up, and I like it. The problem, of course, is, and they explore this in the documentary, which I think was hysterically funny. It's not the early days of the internet, but it is the earliest days of internet culture as we currently know it. So many of the choices they make, like separating the game, or there's a whole thing with review embargoes. They fully expected the internet to understand and be understanding of the situation that they were in, and the internet is not. The internet is furious at them on regular intervals, and they're always caught off guard. And in retrospect, through today's lens, you're looking at what they're doing, and they're having these conversations where they're like, "No, I think it's going to be fine," and you're like, "It's not going to be fine."
What are you doing? Like individuals are smart and understanding, and but the individuals comprising the entire internet are stupid and angry.
Oh yes.
I think there are certain members of the Double Fine team who are like, I don't think this is going to be fine. I'm glad it's as like manageable as it is.
Yeah, but like this was a pioneering game for Kickstarters in more ways than one. Like I think this is one of the first times that they were confronted with the idea that when gamers actually have a stake, like a monetary stake in a game's development, they can be a little demanding.
Oof.
Just a little bit.
I even see that in things like Patreon communities. Like there's a creator who has a Patreon that I follow, and she like responded to some idiot online where like she mentioned having a good Patreon month and then going out to eat or something. And then an idiot in the replies said, "Hey, I'm technically one of your bosses. Why aren't you making content with my money instead of going out to eat?" It's like the sense of entitlement ramps up a little bit when players or patrons or whatever or backers, like when they feel like they're a contributor and part of the process, the sense of entitlement can go up. And I couldn't believe what I was reading when I saw that comment, which was a long time ago, a couple of years ago at least.
And 2011 was, I think, the very beginning of. We were seeing shades of it, obviously, but like the real, I'm going to say ownership, and I do not mean this in a positive sense, of the things that they like really started.
Fans feeling ownership of their own fandom. That's a whole podcast topic on its own.
Yeah,
and that's when it really started. And this game, I think, was the recipient of a lot of negative internet backlash because nothing like this had ever happened before. And they're thinking, I already paid. Where's my game? Why are you only giving me half of the game? This is crap. And it's like, well, they're giving you a lot more than you paid. 3.3 million. They're going to be putting a couple more million of their own dollars into it. Maybe you should shut the hell up and just wait.
And also they were originally planning on something different, and now they're doing more. And they did. I mean, the documentary, and like I was a backer. They did make several efforts to kind of like keep people updated and explain what was going on. I think they did that to the best of their ability, but...
Was it Kotaku? I can't remember the outlet. But the idea is they wanted to, in the documentary, they wanted to give the game out to the backers first before anyone else played it and before it was reviewed and before reviewers got their hands on it. But because some reviewers at certain game sites were backers, they got the game and they said, well, screw the embargo. I own it. It's mine. I paid for it. So they would release a review way before everyone else. And because the backers didn't get like the final version of the game, they got like the one just before.
Mm-hmm. It affected the review and the review scores. It affected
the review and review scores and things like that. So like, and that's in their defense. Like I if they paid for it, we do it. So when like we purchase a game, for RPG Fan, we can review it. And they paid for the game. They got the game. They can review the game. But it was just, they didn't quite know how to handle that yet. They were really figuring out their own way of how to handle this whole kickstart episodic release schedule. They were pioneers of a lot of different things. and they screwed up sometimes, and that's totally okay. And that's why I love the documentary. It's because they do not try to sugarcoat how badly they screwed up in a few places.
Yeah, I realize now, or I already realized, I guess, that I am playing this game from the best perspective possible. Years removed from all of this controversy,
and in as a single
yeah,
story. Yep.
and played it as a single connected package. And if I'm stuck, there's a 1,000 online guides I can check. So it and also there's a wonderful documentary that will provide insight on the development of the game. It's I 100% recommend playing this game a decade after it came out.
There you go.
Yeah, if you're listening to this, don't play it in 2014.
Agreed. If you want to time travel while playing one of these adventure games, maybe the Back to the Future game from Telltale is more your speed.
There you go.
Or Day of the Tentacle.
I'd say Day of the Tentacle. Oh God.
Yeah, I mean, I as a backer, like I do remember a lot of this stuff, some of it at least happening and following the game, but I think it was a heavy school program education time for me too. So I would have approached it from a, like let the team make what they want to make. I trust them kind of perspective, but that was even more so just because I was busy and I knew I wasn't going to be able to like play the game for a while.
Yeah, but Hilary, you're also a reasonable, understanding human being.
Oh, geez, in 2014, I was definitely not in school. I was just playing disgusting amounts of Diablo 3, and listening to like 50 podcasts. But I know that the zeitgeist of this game is different from the current state of this game, and in a lot of ways, it was a pioneer of both episodic content and crowdfunding. So it's a little weird talking about that 8 years later.
Yeah.
But I mean, it's mentioned in the documentary, and there's plenty of historical record. This was a weird time, but even though it was made under weird times and weird circumstances, I can't argue with the final product. This is a cool, well-written game that, almost all of my complaints about it have to do with bizarro adventure game logic, which again I've said over and over the course of this month.
Which is fair.
Yes, and it's an interesting thing because I mean, if you look at the game today compared to when it was released, adventure games aren't dead anymore. Like back in 2011. Adventure games were quote unquote dead. Yeah, Telltale existed, but this type of adventure game was dead. The LucasArts model.
No one wanted to make it.
Yeah, this was bringing it back. The reason why this Kickstarter was so successful is because these games weren't being made outside of Germany.
No.
Oh yeah, like the Eye of Satanov people.
I was thinking the adventure games were huge in Europe in the late 2010s. Pendulo Studios was releasing the Runaway series, and The Next Best Thing, and there were lots of other games. But this, they were classic adventure games, and some of them were very, very good. But like Western studios were not making adventure games. Like,
yeah, I was mistaken. The game I was thinking of was Dark Eye: Chains of Satanov, which was developed in Germany in 2012. So but you're right. Adventure games were very specific, very niche, and it was probably hard to get producers and publishers for adventure games in North America. Even though
impossible.
I'm sure Double Fine wanted to make games like it, but couldn't until the Kickstarter. I 100% believe that.
Yeah, Ron Gilbert and Tim Schafer both went on the record on this topic saying, yeah, one reason Broken Age happened the way it did is because that's the way it could happen at the time. Like you mentioned adventure games in this style to a publisher and they just would flat out refuse.
No, they would just lie. They would laugh you out of the room if you went in and pitched an adventure game. But like, it's interesting when you look at Tim Schafer's other games, which Sollosi you've been playing lots of lately. Yeah, they're different genres, but you can genuinely see, like, can you imagine a full point-and-click adventure game version of Psychonauts or Brutal Legend, like with these kind of adventure game puzzles and puzzle logic? Like I can very easily see it. Like if he had these ideas back in the LucasArts adventure game days, that these could have been classics using those mechanics.
Psychonauts does have adventure game DNA in there with your different psychic powers and how you interact. It would be a different kind of game, and boss battles would look very different. But there is a world where Psychonauts is a great adventure game. I can totally see it.
Yeah. And I'm glad, because I don't think that Broken Age broke the dam in terms of adventure games. That was happening. Partially it was happening because we were just starting to move into the nostalgia phase of the late 1980s, early 90s. And obviously things are going to come back that were popular in those things. We've been seeing it nonstop. At 30 years after something comes out, it's popular again. Because that generation now has money and they want to play what they're used to. So this game hit at exactly the right time for that.
Exactly. And we got a lot of other great, more recent games kind of following, which is great.
Yeah. And from some of the original creators, Thimbleweed Park, for example.
Yeah, Thimbleweed Park. We got
More
a new
recently,
Monkey Island game.
Return of Monkey Island. Yeah, exactly.
Oh, geez. So many more. Unavowed.
Unavowed's very good.
I think now that it's with digital storefronts and crowdfunding and like more tools at our disposal, and like more connections between creators and customers, like more of these games are getting made and are finding their audiences more easily. So it's maybe not a golden age. I mean, I don't know enough about the current the current buffet of adventure games to say that or not, but like the environment now is a healthier one for adventure games to live in than 10 years ago.
Oh, absolutely.
Yep. And also, again, because the generation that is currently in their prime grew up playing 90s era adventure games. Unfortunately, if I had to put money on this, I might be wrong, and I really hope I am. But 5 to 10 years from now, I think adventure games might be going through another dead period, because the generation that follows my generation and the generation of people who grew up playing Sierra and LucasArts adventure games, early 2000s, adventure games didn't exist. That's not part of their childhood. So the question is, pop culture, I think, is going to move away from it again. Unfortunately, that's just a guess.
My feeling is that adventure games are evolving. Like the adventure games of the 2010s don't like resemble, but aren't the same as the ones from the 90s. But also, visual novels are getting more and more popular every year. The 2000s gave us things like Steins Gate and Ace Attorney and Danganronpa. And I notice more and more visual novels resembling classic adventure games, especially. I mean, Hilary, you and I recorded some episodes on 999 and VLR.
Yeah, it's such an interesting trend.
Yeah, those are visual novels with a lot of adventure game ideas in those
Puzzles.
And so I really think that adventure games are their own thing, visual novels are their own thing, but they are moving towards an asymptote and taking inspiration from each other. So I think that there will be adventure games and visual novels in the next generation, but they won't look the same as the ones we've been playing this month. They will exist in some form, but it will be different. And I'm interested to try it because these are games that I like to. I'm not, I haven't played as many visual novels as Nikki or Audra, and I have not played as many adventure games as either of you two. But I'm interested to see how both of those genres evolve because I really think they're on a parallel track.
I hope so.
Yeah, I hope so too. I've definitely seen them informing each other increasingly, for sure.
Yeah.
Out of the 3 games that we played for Adventure Game Month, what were your what was your favorite?
Oh boy, that's a tough one.
I'll say mine then. For me, it was Secret of Monkey Island. And I don't think that's just nostalgia. I like Broken Age, but I feel like it is not what I would. It's not what I would put as top Tim Schafer. It's not one of Tim Schafer's top games. It's good, it's solid, but it's not his best. It's a very good game. Wolf Among Us, really solid story involving characters that I really, really like. Excellent acting, but I feel the game side of it is a little bit lacking. The adventure game side of it, puzzle solving, for example. It's much more narrative adventure, a very elaborate visual novel for me. For me, Secret of Monkey Island is not just a classic, but it is the full package in terms of integration of gameplay and story and mechanics. It's for me the best, one of the greatest adventure games ever made. So it's my favorite out of the 3 that we played this month.
My answer to that is a little cheesy. I think my favorite was The Wolf Among Us, but it was because I like Bigby more than any of the other main characters here, and the story was dramatic and interesting and exciting, and also the least frustrating. Like I thought the puzzle designs in Broken Age and Secret of Monkey Island were often brilliant. Like the insult sword fighting in Monkey Island is great. A lot of I liked the story framework and how the puzzles were set up in Broken Age, but it got a little too weird at the end. Because it had all of the writing and story stuff that I love with fewer frustrations, I think I probably had the most moment-to-moment fun with Wolf Among Us. But all three are great, and I really felt like I had a video game education this month, because all three of those games were ones I had wanted to play for some time, but finally got around to, and I thought all three were worthwhile experiences. Absolutely.
Great. Oh, well, yeah, this is a really, really tough call because, as we said earlier, I think we picked three great representatives of what these games are and can be in their various iterations. I mean, Secret of Monkey Island it's the most classic adventure game and just a great example of what the genre can be. And Wolf Among Us definitely was the most bingeable. Like, I definitely think this, just the story itself, it was dramatic. It hooked me. I think that might have been the one that I finished most quickly, and I think that's by design. But I think I am going to have to say that Broken Age is my favorite, and I'm fully aware that a lot of it is probably due to my own like sentimental attachment to it, having watched the documentary, having been a backer, and just the type of story it is. I'm a huge sucker for the type of story it is. This kind of like slightly melancholy, but also hopeful coming of age story, beautifully told with a lot of great characters. Just, yeah, I think for narrative reasons, I might have to go with Broken Age.
I mean, I'll just say it. I think each of us hosted the episode that fit us best.
Yep. Turns out
there's not a wrong answer to those questions, because
No.
these are different types of adventure games with different tones and different and different concepts they were executing, but none of them are bad. Like I'm going to echo what both of you said. I think we made three really good choices for the games this month. And I'm repeating myself, I guess, but I'm glad I got around to all of them, because they're all three are worthwhile playthroughs.
I'm really glad you got to play through them all too, Sollosi.
Yeah.
And now I'm much more interested in Wolf Among Us 2 and Return to Monkey Island, and I mean I love Psychonauts 2, so I'm probably going to finish that in the next couple days and then be excited for whatever Double Fine has next. It's the only loser here really is my wallet, because now I have more. Now I just have more things that I want to buy.
So with that said, we are gradually coming to a close with Adventure Game Month. Our next episode here on Retro is going to be kind of a Halloween special, sort of still in the genre, with the Quarry.
The third wolf.
Yep, that is our ending wolf.
Welcome to Wolf Monk here at Wolf Monk.
Almost.
Welcome to Wolf Month here at Retro Encounter.
Almost completely Wolf Month.
Would that be a good show, Wolf Monk, Sollosi? Just,
I mean, Tony Shalhoub is a werewolf detective in San Francisco.
Yes, would you watch that?
You're absolutely damn right I would watch that.
Yeah, I would too. Oh, the werewolf part would just be a bonus. Anyway,
he has crippling OCD and is a werewolf.
It doesn't seem like a very good combination. I need to see how this works. Okay. Well, if we're joking about that, so we have the Quarry coming up, more wolves. Episode 350 is coming up as well, and I'll leave that a surprise for now, but it's very exciting. And we also have the month of Mass Effect coming up on Retro. We briefly mentioned that because some of us are playing through those at the same time we were finishing up Broken Age and getting double Jennifer Hale. If you'd like to email us, the email address here is retro@rpgfan.com. Please do. Also, remember to comment on the boards, visit the Facebook page, RPG Fancom on Twitter and Instagram, and check out Discord, YouTube, our Twitch channel, and also keep an eye out on the site for the shop that we recently opened. There are sales every month, and we try to kind of publicize those on social media, so keep an eye out, buy some RPG Fan merch. We also have two other lovely podcasts. Random Encounter, which, John, I don't know if you want to give us a little preview what's coming next on Random.
When is this coming out again? In October? I have
It's
absolutely...
posting on my birthday, October 20th.
October 20th? Okay, let's see the schedule here. October 20th. Yeah, so if this is posting on October 20th, then next week should be a Yakuza feature, where we're going to be talking about the big Yakuza feature that came out a couple of weeks ago.
Oh, you mean the big Like a Dragon feature?
Yes, the big Like a Dragon Yakuza feature. It's addressed in the feature. Unless, of course, something massive drops, like if they shadow drop Tears of the Kingdom, then we'll probably be focusing on that instead. But we'll see. It's probably going to be Yakuza.
And we also have Rhythm Encounter, our music podcast. And coming up on that, we've got Castlevania for spooky season. And we're also going to have an episode on Pokemon.
That's right. The Castlevania episode is going to land right on Halloween, and the Pokemon episode is going to be, I think, within a couple days of Scarlet and Violet coming out, like that same week or something. So the timing is very, very deliberate for the next couple Rhythm Encounters.
Worked out perfectly. And please, if you enjoyed listening, consider reviewing on Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Spotify, or whatever format you use for your podcasts. We love feedback, and it definitely helps. So please review. So let's talk about where to find us. So for me, Hilary, the best way to reach me for RPG fan or adventure game quandaries comments would be on our Discord on EP Fire there. Where can everyone find you, Sollosi?
Right. I'm easiest to find on Twitter. I am at The Real Monsoon most of the time, at Evoker for Dogs at other times, and at RPG Fans Discord, I am Monsoon Mike.
Great. And how about you, Jenna?
You can find me at jlogan at rpgfan.com, or you can find me on Twitter at jono_Logan.
Well, thank you all for partaking in Adventure Game Month with me.
Woo!
I know this has run a little bit long, but I think we had fun kind of going into the context around this game. So I think it's time to sign off, and we'll be back with the quarry soon. Thanks so much for joining us. Good night. Good luck.
Happy birthday, Hilary.
Thank you.